I'm thinking about sex, and I'm wondering something about sex. I'm wondering why nature has made sex so pleasurable, so desirable, such that men would pursue the pleasure of sex very strongly. So I'm wondering why sex is not just a functional activity in order to produce a child eventually. Why did nature make sex so desirable and pleasurable? And it seems to me initially that nature has made sex so pleasurable and desirable such that men would pursue the pleasure of sex intensely and would regard it with in a strong fashion. They would seek sexual pleasure very strongly. And it seems to me that nature has made it this way, such that men would pursue sex and not be thoughtful as to consequences. I'm thinking basically, if nature made sex just a functional activity in order to achieve pregnancy and children, if it had no pleasure associated with it, if it was just a process in order to lead to children, maybe not enough sex would be happening, not enough children will be produced. So it seems to me that nature made sex so pleasurable so that men would seek that pleasure as a priority and would be less mindful as to the consequences of children. In other words, nature has made sex so pleasurable for men so that men would pursue that pleasure and not be so mindful of consequences of children. The pursuit of pleasure is the main thing, and if pregnancy results, then that wasn't the point, but it will be accepted because the pursuit of pleasure is the main thing. So I'm thinking that if sex was just a functional activity with no pleasure associated with it, then maybe not enough sex would be happening because not enough children would be created, because many children are born. I haven't thought about the numbers and how that works out, but many children who are created were not intended to be created. They came about due to the consequences of sex. I think a large number of people who were created, a large number of children created, were not intended to be created. They came about as a consequence of the pursuit of sex. So nature has made sex so pleasurable and desirable so that men would pursue that pleasure and be less mindful, less concerned with the production of children. I think it's interesting how nature has made sex so pleasurable so that men would pursue the pleasure of sex strongly and be less mindful of the consequences of children. It would be interesting to know how many children who were born were intended and how many were a consequence of sex but unintended. It would be interesting to know that for sure. But I do suspect that many children who are born were not intended to be produced, but were just a byproduct of the pursuit of sex from a man's point of view. And I will think on this some more, but I do think initially that this is why nature made sex so pleasurable. Because it didn't need to make sex so pleasurable, but it did so that men will pursue the pleasure and be less mindful of the consequences of children.